Well, hello, and welcome to our new channel, The Interests of the People. And today I'm joined by John Adams. Hello, John.
Hello, sir.
So we've migrated to a whole new world.
A new world for a new year.
Exactly. And so the idea is this is the intersection of politics, economics, and financial things, right?
Yes.
But in an unfettered way.
Yes.
So we are going to expect more sparks.
Yes.
We're going to expect more corrosive views from you.
Yes.
And hopefully orientated around this wonderful concept that actually the people need to know what's going on.
Indeed. So I think that we would like to focus on mainly, obviously, the economy in 2019, but there's a whole host of other issues impacting on the Australian people that I think we need to have a more robust, open, frank discussion about. So, given that there's a whole host of controversial figures across the world being deplatformed, I thought it'd be worthwhile to set up a new channel, take off the shackles, so to speak, and really give it a rip for 2019.
Yeah, okay. And I think that's worth emphasising, John. It was your idea to basically move, and I was okay to support it, and partly to protect the old DFA work, because that's still going on, and we'll put a link back to the DFA channel for people who don't know about DFA. But essentially, this is about giving more free rein to perhaps those more radical views, which may or may not create ructions.
Yes, indeed. So yeah, and what better way in 2019 to talk about the interests of the people, to talk about a very unique case study from 10 years ago. So obviously, last year, when we talked about the economy, when we talked about this coming crisis, Armageddon, we talked about, what do the establishment know from the Parliament, from the Reserve Bank to APRA? Are they ignorant? Are they walking blind? Do they know? Are they engaged in a strategy of plausible deniability, as I was told by a member of Parliament last year? Why aren't they really addressing the most obvious challenge in front of the economy? So what I thought we would do in this episode is to talk about a very specific example where 10 years ago, a politician, in answering a letter from a constituent, wrote a letter saying no financial crisis is coming, and then years later, it was revealed that politician knew the financial crisis was coming and was selling assets, and basically said nothing on the public record at the time. That I think to a lot of people, it is a bit of a shock to be able to sort of talk about this case study. And I was talking to a few people last year off camera about, if I was to tell you about this case study, a lot of people said to me, I'd be shocked if that occurred. Well, it did occur, and that's what we're going to talk about today.
Right, so just to be clear, a senior politician
Yes.
was facing one way publicly,
Yes.
but was facing a completely different way privately.
Precisely.
Right.
Not only that, they wrote a letter, a constituent sent a letter to them, they sent a letter back, and their public position, they put their signature on it. And we have a copy of that letter.
Okay, right. So we should say this is all in the public domain.
Yes.
Right? So we're not spreading rumours and stuff. This is actually out there.
Yes.
All you're doing is just bringing the threads together.
Precisely.
Okay.
Yes. So who was the politician? The politician was Joe Hockey, who was the former member for North Sydney, former shadow treasurer, and now the Australian ambassador in the United States.
Okay, so what was his role at the time when he was doing this particular thing?
So he received correspondence in 2007. He was the Minister for Industrial Relations. So this was at the time where John Howard was Prime Minister, Peter Costello was Treasurer. So he was a senior minister in the government, in the cabinet. And he had a letter sent by a constituent in the electorate of North Sydney saying that I think we're headed towards some sort of global financial crisis. And on the 12th of August 2007, Mr. Hockey wrote a letter back, and we'll put the letter on the screen. But the key quote is, Mr. Hockey writes, I note your views. I, however, disagree vehemently with your analysis that the world is facing a collapse of the financial markets. Now, that letter went back. the constituent, he accepted that letter. Now, let's say how we got a copy of this letter. Now, the constituent who wrote to Hockey is a member of the Citizens Electoral Council. So the Citizens Electoral Council, so Robbie Barwick, who has been on your DFA channel, he has published this letter a number of years ago, but in preparation for this particular episode, Robbie got me the original letter. So this is authentic, genuine communication from Hockey's office of 2007. So that was his position then in 2007. Years later, in 2013, the beginning of 2013, heading into an election year, there was a few articles about Hockey, because it was the heir apparent to becoming treasurer. The political wins were quite obvious for journalists to say, well, looks like coalition's going to win. Hockey's going to be the treasurer, and so there were certain articles that were written. Now, there was one article that was written that came out when I was actually working in Parliament in the opposition, and I didn't know about this 2007 letter, but I was really amazed with what this article had to say in 2013. And this was a article written by News Limited. It's written by Samantha Maiden in News Limited. That talks about how Hockey actually knew the GFC was coming. He was told by his wife, who was a senior executive at Deutsche Bank in the Australian branch, and they were in the process of selling assets when Hockey's wife came up with the revelation that we're headed towards some sort of big economic crisis. So the title of the article, and this is again on the public record, News Limited. The title of the article is Treasurer Joe Hockey and Financial Guru Melissa Babbage have a very modern political marriage. Sunrise host David Koch, which is obviously Channel 7, still remembers the day Joe Hockey rang to tell him his investment banker wife, Melissa Babbage, was selling everything we own. It was a year before the global financial crisis hit and the stock market was riding high. Joe rang and he said, Melissa, she is selling everything, says Koch. He said, I've convinced her to keep the house, but she reckons we're headed for the biggest global economic event since the Great Depression. She was right. Koch, who wrote a column based on the tip that he was rubbish for at the time, describes Babbage as an absolute guru. She saw it coming. Joe Hockey tells agenda. It's true. So here we are. This is News Limited. Hockey was asked about this. He says it's true. His wife saw the GFC coming, and they sold a lot of assets prior to the financial markets collapsing. So obviously they took steps to protect the financial wealth. Now, so obviously, the key question is, how can Hockey write on the one hand on the 12th of August 2007 saying, I vehemently disagree that a collapse of financial markets is happening, and yet this revelation comes out. Now, so there's obviously a couple of points to make. The first point is, what we don't know precisely is, when did his wife tell Mr. Hockey that the financial markets were about to collapse? Was it before the 12th of August 2007, or was it after? So in fairness to Mr. Hockey, it could well be that when he signed this letter in August of 2007, it was his genuine view at the time, and he was told subsequent by his banker wife that, no, your view is actually wrong and it's about to collapse. If he was told, now obviously if he was told before the 12th of August and he signed this letter, I think it's a massive ethical violation at least. If he was told after the 12th, well, a couple of issues. One is he never went back to the constituent to update the constituent, say, hey, on the 12th of August I told you this, I've now revised my position and I have a different view. He never did that. He never actually made any public statement to Parliament or in the public domain saying we're headed towards some big financial disaster. Now, in 2013, when this article came out, the constituent himself wrote back to Hockey and said, hey, you sent me this letter in August 2007 saying no financial crisis, and yet this article saying you knew it all along. Why the inconsistency? And to that piece of correspondence, Mr. Hockey never responded in 2013.
Right. And I suppose you could argue that people are legitimately allowed to change their mind, right?
Yes.
Because if new information comes in, you might change your mind.
Precisely.
But nevertheless, the fact is that he said something to a particular person at a particular time and signed the letter. So like it or not, there does seem to be a little bit of a pull in two directions going on.
Yes, yes. Now the thing is that so obviously I have been writing for 3 years that we're headed towards a big economic crisis of one form or another. There are a lot of people out there who are waking up to the realities, obviously with the housing market, starting to fall and a few other things. But there's still an expectation that people think that if there is pending danger, someone will tell me about it. The Prime Minister, the Parliament, the media, the banks, the Reserve Bank, etc. So there is an expectation that this situation just won't happen because it's against some sort of rule. Now, the point here is that Mr. Hockey didn't break any laws and he didn't break any rules. And when I've done a bit of research on this and speaking to a professor of politics and Australian history at the University of Wollongong, the view of the professor was parliamentarians are under no obligation to tell their constituents of any impending danger, whether it's economic or otherwise.
Right. So that's interesting. So what you're saying is that politicians have no obligation, even if they can see something really worrying coming down the road, they have no obligation to alert anybody or say anything about it.
Precisely. So there is no rule or law that says to a politician, if you think your constituents are in danger, you must say X.
Okay.
So there is no requirement.
Right.
Now the thing is that so people obviously have a view about democracy and say, well, I've elected this person to represent my interests, therefore that person will, in representing my interests, protect my interests if they know there's something in danger. Now, part of what I want to go into now is to shatter that complete myth, because that is the general understanding of the democratic system, but that's technically not how the system is structured.
So, John, let me just replay that back to you, because I'm quite surprised at this. My elected parliamentary representative has no obligation with regard to thinking about my interests particularly, or if they know stuff, they have no obligation to share that stuff.
Precisely. So yes. So the general understanding of democracy is that your representative or senator would represent your interests, but technically that is not how Parliament works. So Section 42 of the Australian Constitution requires that no matter what happens during an election, a member or senator, before taking their seat in Parliament, have to give either an oath or affirmation. So let me just obviously sort of talk about Section 42. So this is straight from the Constitution. Section 42 of the Australian Constitution: every senator and every member of the House of Representatives shall, before taking his seat, make and subscribe before the Governor General or some person authorised by him an oath or affirmation of allegiance in the form set forth in the schedule to this Constitution. So this is Section 42 to say you can't, even if you're elected, if you don't technically give this oath or affirmation, you can't actually become a parliamentarian. Now, what is the oath or what is the affirmation? So this is outlined in the schedule of the Constitution. And to save a bit of time, I'll just sort of go through the oath. So the oath is: you state your name, do swear that I will faithfully and bear true allegiance to Her Majesty Queen Victoria, her heirs and successors, according to law, so help me God. So obviously this was written in 1901 when Queen Victoria was the Queen, but obviously it says in the schedule that you obviously just change the name of the monarch as the monarch goes forward. So you notice that in this oath that the people are not mentioned. Australia is not mentioned. The Australian people are not mentioned. It is you are being faithful and bearing true allegiance to Her Majesty. So when you are elected, your obligation is not to us; it is to her.
Wow.
So that technically is the system. So on election day, when you go to the ballot box to vote, you are not voting for a parliamentarian who will serve your interests. You are voting for the best parliamentarian who technically will serve the Queen the best.
Right. But surely people would expect that is being interpreted differently now, in terms of the fact that we've got, a society and a population that's grown. We've got our own momentum now. But nevertheless, it's still directly back to the monarch.
Yes, yes. Now, so a couple of points to make here. First one is that so obviously you can take an oath, which is you swear, by God that you'll be faithful and bear true allegiance, or you can have some sort of affirmation. Now, there are members of Parliament who are quite very deeply religious, and they have given an oath, and we actually have a video of people like Abbott and Hockey having an oath at the opening of the 2010 Parliament, swearing an oath to Her Majesty the Queen.
Abbott, Curtin, Julie Isabel Bishop, Wide Bay, Warren Errol Truss, North Sydney, Joseph B. Hockey, Sturt, Christopher Morris Pine, Goldstein, Andrew John Robb, Groom, Ian Elgin McFarlane, Wentworth, Malcolm Bly Turnbull, Dixon, Peter Craig Dutton, Menzies, Kevin James Andrews, Flinders, Gregory Andrew Hunt, Cook, Scott John Morrison. Honourable members, making an oath, please take the Bible in your right hand. Do each of you swear that you will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, her heirs and successors, according to law, so help you God?
I do, so help me God.
So what we just saw is Abbott and Hockey swear by God that they will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Her Majesty the Queen. Now, both of them claim to be Christians. Now, as a Christian, it actually has significant theological meaning. So even though you asked me before, surely times have moved on, I would say that if you are a committed Christian and you are giving an oath, well, that actually oath has theological significance, number one. Number two is that in preparing for the show, I actually asked a former member of Parliament and a current senator, you have given this oath. What did this mean to you? Now, the former member of Parliament, who served for about 12 years in the House of Representatives, thought it was purely, in their view, purely ceremonial. Whether it's the oath or the affirmation, where this parliamentarian said to me that when he said those words, he did not have the Queen in mind, and that he was thinking about the Australian people, Australia, his electorate. That's what he was pledging allegiance to, even though the words technically do not say that. Now, that was an interesting observation by someone who had to give the oath or recite the oath. Now, I went to a current senator and I asked this senator, when you had to give an oath or an affirmation, did you view this as purely ceremonial? And the senator said no. So very different view. So it's not ceremonial. So the words mean something. Now, I asked him, how does this oath impact your job? He didn't come back to me with an answer. So that is what I don't know. And to be honest, I think it's a very personal reflection for each member and senator when they say, okay, some will say these words have no meaning. Some say no, they do have meaning. The question is, how does it actually impact their job? I think that's that's a difference that happens from politician to politician. So I can't say how these words actually impact members of Parliament. So for those watching this show, they may wish to actually write to the member of Parliament. You didn't swear allegiance to me. You swore allegiance to the Queen. What does that mean? Are you here for her or are you here for me?
Right, because you could see situations where, in fact, you'd make one set of decisions if you were thinking about the British Empire and the Queen and the monarchy versus what might be in the interests of local people here in Australia.
Yes.
You could see it pulling in two different directions.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Precisely. So my argument is that because Hockey swore allegiance to Her Majesty and he didn't swear allegiance to us or to his constituents, therefore he didn't break any laws, he didn't break any rules, he didn't break any oaths. I mean, the only thing that parliamentarians have to do is they have a register of interests that they outline their assets. So as long as that register that is updated as the assets are being sold, that is in compliance with the parliamentary rules. But there's obviously ways that you can change your asset portfolio mix, and hiding it. Particularly, for example, if all of your assets are in a trust and you're selling those assets, well, all you have to do on your parliamentary form is say you've got a trust, not what the trust is actually doing. So there's ways to hide this if you are intent to hide this. So I haven't studied Mr. Hockey's interest form from that period, but we do know that his wife was selling a lot of the family assets.
Right. But I'm sort of thinking here, hang on a moment, I guess the Queen might have lost a little bit of money during the GFC.
Yes.
It would have rather been useful if Hockey had mentioned to her that he had this concern.
Yes. So the really interesting tangent here is that the Queen herself, the royal family lost quite a bit of money in the GFC, and in November of 2008, the Queen took a briefing from economists from the London School of Economics, and she asked the academics, "Why didn't anyone see this coming?" Now, the sort of crazy angle for me is that one person who swore to be faithful to the Queen knew it was coming. The Queen said, "Why didn't anyone see it was coming?" Well, one could argue that Hockey, knowing that it was going to happen, he swore an allegiance and to be faithful and an oath to the Queen. He should have alerted the palace. He should have alerted perhaps the Prime Minister or the Governor General, or maybe written like a direct letter to the palace itself and saying, "I have an oath to you. I think your family's wealth is in danger, as in the royal family, the Crown's wealth. I'm alerting you to this to be compliant with my oath." But from all that I can see, Hockey did not do that, because one would suspect that if the Queen received correspondence from an Australian parliamentarian in 2007, she in November of 2008 would have asked academics at the London School of Economics, "Why didn't anyone see this coming?" So did Hockey breach his oath by not informing the palace? He potentially may have, but I'm assuming no one's going to bring him up on that.
Gosh. It gets more and more interesting, doesn't it?
Yes, yes. So I think the key point from this, from our first episode, is members and senators of Parliament technically do not serve the interests of the people. They take an oath to serve the interests of the Crown, of the monarch, and because they do that, they don't have any technical rules or laws to tell us if there is an impending economic crisis, that this is actually happening.
Right. Now, of course, some will probably interpret it differently to others, as your point was made. So you can't automatically assume that no parliamentarian is not interested in the people of Australia and what they're up to, right?
Yeah, sure,
and their consequences. That's not what you're saying.
No.
What you're saying is technically,
yes,
right? Technically, they are not under any obligation to do that.
Precisely. Yeah. And it's obviously, when we look at last year, we had Tim Wilson, the member for Goldstein. He gave two speeches, one in February, where he mentioned me on the record and said that we've got massive problems in the Australian economy and the global economy. But then he gave another speech in early December, giving a update to the House about these economic challenges. So there's one person who believes that technically he's under no obligation to do so. He thought it was important that he put his views out there. And obviously we're starting to see some politicians saying, "Oh, there are some dark clouds sort of over the horizon." Now, I was told again by a member of Parliament that the establishment know they have screwed up the economy and that they are hoping for this strategy of plausible deniability. So they're waiting for the shock. China, Europe, America, something has to happen that will allow them to say, "It wasn't us, it was them. We did a reasonable job, but it was the world that collapsed. Not we didn't drive Australia into the ditch." So I thought, because of that, part of this channel, part of this genre of talking about the interests of the people is, well, I think there's a vacuum out there, about who will serve, who will talk about the interests of the people, and I'd like to obviously help to fulfil that role in 2019. So here we are.
Right, and that's the point, isn't it? This channel is about information, so we're going to share information. We're going to share strong points of view, and some of those points of view may well not be aligned with mainstream thinking.
Yes.
Because in many cases, the mainstream actually has gone down a rabbit hole and has missed the point.
Yes.
Which is why a combination of economics, the finance and politics have to come together. So on this channel, you're going to get truth, and it's going to be built from the interests of the people.
Precisely.
John, thank you very much. Look forward to the next one.
Thank you.
So there you have it. Our first episode. Hope you enjoyed it. If you haven't subscribed, please do so, and be sure to catch up with our next episode. Martin North and John Adams, for all the interests of the people.